Good morning or good afternoon, depending on where you are today, or actually afternoon for everyone. 12. Let's see here. Keith, we've got about 15 folks in right now. So if you want to wait a couple minutes, we can for some others to trickle in. It's up to you.
Yeah, I just want to say good afternoon to everyone. This is Heath Alexander. We are going to start the webinar shortly. We will wait a couple more minutes just to make sure everyone technically can get into the webinar. We still have a couple people being added every few seconds. Once we see people stop trickling in, we'll get started. So, welcome. Guys, I think we're ready now. Welcome to the EOC webinar. Just wanted to let you all know that this webinar is designed for a intro level grant writing content. So it's not that if you've been writing grants before that you may not gain some tidbits of information from this, but we kind of designed this for the new director in mind. Someone maybe who inherited an EOC grant and had never written the grant, then or someone who wants new EOC grant, and so it is somewhat introductory. We drill down a little bit to some fine details of some sections, but it is a 1 hour sort of intro. So if you are of EOC and you've written the grant several times before, please stick around. We got good feedback from the talent search one that veteran directors learn from it. And also you'll have a chance to ask some questions during a Q&A or even just throughout the presentation. But I just wanted to set the stage for the content of presentation. I'm going to share my screen and we'll get right to presentation. Okay. So again, this is the EOC Grantwriting 101, and I'm your presenter, Heath Alexander. Today's agenda will be just a brief introduction itself. We'll do some housekeeping items related to Zoom meetings and this particular webinar. A little bit of an icebreaker, just kind of a mood meter to check the room. We're going to launch a couple of polls to learn about the participants to see who's in the room. And then we'll cover some high-level information about each of the sections of the grant. So we will go through all of the sections, and then just some sort of nuts and bolts or tidbits of information that thing. And then we'll do some odds and ends and things like that as well. We'll follow that up by a Q&A, and then we'll ask you to fill out a brief evaluation. So just a couple of housekeeping items. We are doing this webinar style, which means that there's less sort of open communication as we might have in a typical meeting. So everyone would be on mute. We do have the ability to have you unmute and sort of do some, some verbal discussion or questions if anyone feels like they need that as well. But in this session, session, two options to interact with the webinar. One is that you can use the chat box to communicate with each other. You can ask questions of each other as participants, make comments and things like that. And then if you have questions for me, there's a separate Q&A box. So if you look at the bottom, you'll see the Q&A. So that's where you want to pose questions directly to the speaker. If you're putting questions to me, the presenter, in the chat box, I may or may not be able to get to them. We do have two producers here, Laura and Milena, and so they will also be monitoring that, but we do prefer the Q&A box for any of those kinds of questions. We are going to launch about 5 different polls, so please just answer them quickly, and that way we won't take a lot of time with those, but I do want to do some interactive kinds of things. And then, be prepared to interact as best you can and share within the context of the webinar. And then please, at the end, fill out the quick evaluation that we have. It's very electronic, and it's only a few questions. It did not take you very long. So icebreaker. I like to do these kinds of sort of mood meter icebreakers to kick off, meetings and internally some webinars that we do, trainings that we do, get a sense of how they're feeling. There's a lot going on in the world today, obviously, a lot of, we've got a big election coming up, we've got pandemic, got APRs due, grants due. So, there's a lot going on, and we would like to use this the time, for you to kind of tell us how you feel. So I'm going to stop my share real quick, and I'm going to launch this poll. And you should be able to see the poll now. And so you want to select red, yellow, blue, or green, and is based on this particular mood meter here. So I'll just give you a second to launch that. Red is, you're feeling pretty restless. You might be a little bit angry about things that are going on, frustrated. Yellow is, excited, cheerful, energetic, kinds of things. The blue, feeling a little down, maybe lonely, sad, bored, hopefully not bored in the webinar, but overall. And then, blue is just, chill out, relax, calm, satisfied, everything's going great. So those are kind of the feelings of those. Looks like we got about half of you have filled out the poll so far. And once everyone has answered, then we'll show you the results of it. Again, red is, the colors kind of correspond to feelings that as we see them. Red and mad, blue is kind of down, yellow is kind of energetic, and green is kind of calm. Are people left to answer the poll, and then I'll launch it. All right, I'm going to share the results with you. So it looks like 70% of you are, feeling pretty chill, pretty relaxed, a little bit down. Hopefully we can lift up your spirits a little bit. And one person feeling a little bit more on the rough side. And hopefully this, this webinar will bring your spirits up a little bit as well. So it's good to see that already people are feeling pretty relaxed and chill. That's great. All right, so going back to our presentation. We can go back to sorry. I'm gonna go back to this. So, who's in the room is really important too. We want to know a little bit about you, and I also want you to kind of explain a little bit about who I am. As I mentioned earlier, I'm Heath Alexander. I work at Study Smart Tutors. I'm the Director of Grants and Program Evaluation. I do have a long history in TRIO programs. I was a talent search participant when I was in high school, became a summer camp counselor for an Upper Bound program when I was in college, and eventually became teacher coordinator, director of Upper Bound, and spent about 11 years or so working altogether in the Upper Bound program. In 2008, I moved to Washington, D.C., where I live now, to work at the Council for Opportunity in Education. So I spent 7 years, the first 4 or 5 years under Dr. Arnold Mitchum, and then the last couple of years under Maureen Hoyler, and was working on the government relations team, and did a lot of grant writing seminars. I know you guys probably know that COE puts on proposal writing workshops, and I used to teach some of those workshops as well as critique the grants there. And I worked a lot in the grant writing sort of compliance realm, providing support for our membership, whether it be in the grant writing or appeals process. And then about 6 years ago, I started doing private consulting with colleges, universities, and nonprofit organizations to write TRIO grants and do compliance and staff training. And then over this past year, just merged my this with Study Smart Tutors, and so now I'm doing all of this work underneath the company of Study Smart. Study Smart obviously providing grant writing services, as well as other kinds of student workshops and staff training. We'll talk a little bit more about Study Smart Tutors, in the future. Also, please, check out our site at studysmarttutors.com, and you can see a little bit more about the services that we provide there. So I'd like to know a little bit about you as well. And so I'm going to launch an additional poll here. I want to know who you are. So the first thing I would like to know is, what is your current title, either with the EOC or if you don't have an EOC at your institution, your organization? Are you administrator, AVP, dean, above, that kind of thing? Are you current director? Are you advisor or counselor, or executive assistant? Hopefully everyone falls into one of those categories. I know they're kind of tight. So I'll wait here for about a minute until everybody can respond to this, and then I'll share the results with you as well. Okay, looks like we have a couple more of you still to answer, and then once that happens, I'll launch. Also, if you all would like to, to interact verbally, just let us know, and we can unmute you to be able to enable you to speak verbally. All right. So looks like we're very split down the middle. We do have a few more participants than this. Not everyone answered the poll, but those that did answer, it looks like primarily for everybody. So that's really good to know. The other thing I'd like from you is, and a second poll, our third poll, have you ever worked on an EOC grant in the past? Have you write a grant? I'm not in the grant. I mean, have you actually worked on writing the grant before? I don't want to know, your expertise level here, so that sort of frame the way I present some of the material. Okay, I'm going to wait another 30 seconds for everyone to answer. Okay, 10 more seconds. All right. So it looks like the very vast majority of you have never written any of expected. That's what the purpose of this grant, this webinar was supposed to do. Looks like one of you have at least worked on once, and then a couple of you multiple times. So a little bit about everyone, but the majority of you are new at this. So that's, and then, so let's dig into the presentation a little. What I usually, one of the questions I get when we get a call or an email from someone to discuss contracting to write, to help, write the grant or edit the grant. One of the first questions on those calls is, well, when do you think this thing is going to be due? And, that's obviously a major concern. With the EOC grant, follows the same process as all the TRIO programs, and I'm just going to explain that a little bit. It all starts with the draft request proposals, the RFP. And that draft actually was published by the department in the Federal Register in September. I want to say it was September 15th or around there. And while the draft, quote unquote, draft that they published was not an official draft in a sense of they didn't actually make any changes to it, it really was just a copy of the final RFP from 5 years ago. The reason why that is more of a procedural move because we have a 30-day comment period on the draft. So they launched the draft version just so that they could say they did it and they can get that 30-day comment period out of the way. What that means is you can go online or you can ask and we can send you a copy of that RFP. But again, it really was a copy of the 2016 final RFP. What that does is it sets in motion for launching the entire process, the entire grant process. They're required to give you a 30-day comment period. And so we have completed that 30-day comment period. And they usually take about another 30 days or so to compile the comments and either incorporate those comments or not into the final RFP as they're producing it. The fact that they launched the repeat of 2016 version may mean that the final was not ready either, or that they did not have any changes to it yet. So we don't know for sure, but what we do know is that they have not the final request for proposals yet. And in order to do that, they need signatures on it from the Office of Management and Budget, the Congressional Budget Office, and the Secretary of Education. And so even after the comment period and the 30-day compilation period, sometimes it takes them a while to get all of those signatures into the final RFP. Once the final RFP is launched, then they will typically give between 30 and 45 days to submit the grant. The last time EOC was due 5 years ago, they actually gave 2 months the grant from the time the final RFP was out. I don't expect them to give 2 months again, but we will see. The bottom line, we do not know what the due date for EOC will be, and we won't know until the final RFP is launched. Would expect the final RFP to come sometime this year with a due date in early 2021, maybe sometime in January or February. Again, 5 years ago, it was due on April 4th. So the likely scenario, sometime between January and March. Again, the April 4th was the deadline last time, but I don't expect them to give 2 months, and I don't expect the due date to be that late. We can expect in the application that there will be new competitive preference priorities. Last time, 5 years, were 2 competitive preference priorities. One was related and veteran family members. And then there was also another one just about, connecting with family in general and also community. None of those were really particularly in the sense that EOC does a lot of that work already. And so we just had to kind of write to how we were going to do that in the process. So we can expect that there will be competitive preference parties. We just don't know what they're going to be. And that's because there's a new Secretary of Education. Essentially what happens is the Secretary of Education publishes a list of priorities that they're allowed to insert into any federal grant application. Priorities that Betsy DeVos has are different from the ones that her predecessor, Arnie Duncan. So she's drawing from a different set of competitive preference priorities than what he had. Therefore, we would expect them to potentially be different. They may be similar, but they're probably going to be slightly different at minimum. Also, EOC launched a sort of a pattern of action that is not in the select area for EOC, which is requiring a quality of project design or a logic model. It has since been added to all TRIO programs, after that. But we will expect that they will continue that with EOC as well. And I'll explain a little bit about what that means in a second. So the question, how can we write the grant now if we have the request for proposals and we don't know what the due date is and we don't know what's going to be in the answer is because the federal regulations outline selection criteria for an EOC grant. And the selection criteria basically is a response to the federal. What happens is Congress passes a law, and in this case, the Higher Education Act of 1965, which was also reauthorized in 2008. It legislates that there will be TRIO programs. And then the US Department of Education has to take that law and create a set of regulations that govern those programs, in the field in real life. And the regulations, have changed since 2008. And so those regulations outline the selection criteria that goes into an application. What that means is they cannot take anything out of the selection criteria that is already in statute or regulation from 5 years ago because it's been unchanged. What they can do, and what they have been doing, is adding those additional sections. They're adding competitive preference priorities, and they added selection criteria called quality of project design or logic model. So what does that mean? It means that we know about 85 to 90 going to go into the application in the selection criteria already. What we don't know is the other details that the department may add to the selection criteria. They're not allowed to take anything out, but they can add things to it, or at least that's their position, and that's what they've been doing. So the only thing we have to wait for on the RFP is the competitive preference priorities. I would say maybe the quality of project is relatively certain that is going to be an EOC again time. And then the budget amount. We don't know the exact yet, especially for new applications. If you're an existing grant, you're probably going to get a budget similar to your current grant award notification. You may or may not get an increase. I do believe 5 years ago, you were able to write to 103% of your grant award notification. So you did get a bit of an increase. So wait for the RFP to come out to determine what the final budget amount will be. But it's important to know the documents that go into the not only the application, but also running your program. And these are of order of importance as well. The law or the legislation, the Higher Education Act, supersedes everything else. Everything answers to that law. And then the second, and the Education Department General Administrative Regulation third, and then the Office of Management and Budgets Grants Management Super Circulars comes after that, which is more of like sort of how to budget and what's allowable financially. So this is sort of the order of operation of what you should follow in your grant application. The regulations are what specifically outline your selection criteria. So if you go to, let me exit out of this presentation. If you go to, let's see. If you go to the department's website, you can see that they have each of these under. If you just Google TRIO EOC, it's likely that the ed.gov website will pop up. And if you click under laws, regs, and guidance, you'll get this page and get the Word or PDF versions of the law, the regulations, Edgar, and then also some electronic links to the OMB circular. So things are available to you online, in addition. So I'm going to go back to the presentation. All right. Sort of, grant writing question that I have, and I'm going to launch a poll here to just see what people think is, how many EOC grants are you actually allowed to write? So I'm going to launch this poll, and then after this one, I have one more poll to launch. Let's see. Okay, here we go. How many, you should see on your screen the poll now. How many EOC grants can a grant? Only one? You can write for 2, 3, or an unlimited amount. Awesome. Looks like we have some extra room already. Just sharing the results here. You can see that 64% of you said unlimited, and that is the correct answer. You no limit to the number of grants you can submit. They do ask though that each grant that you apply for does propose to serve a different target population, or excuse me, a different target area. So if you live in a location where you can reasonably say that you could, get 1,000 participants to participate in the program in multiple areas, then you can write a grant to address each of those target areas. There is no limit to how many you can write as long as it's a different target area. Who is to apply for an EOC program? Institutions of higher ed, of course, secondary schools, nonprofit organizations, nonprofit entities, community-based organizations, or a common. So, for part, you're going to be collaborating with other entities. If you are not, you certainly, or even a higher, you certainly need to be collaborating with the secondary schools. If you're going to be recruiting students from those schools, or you're going to be working with the adult education program through the secondary. But any of these entities can apply for an EOC. The selection criteria that I mentioned earlier, in the regulations, you'll see under 644.21 that there are sections outlined in those regulations. They're the need, the objectives, the plan of applicant community support, the quality of personnel, the budget, and the evaluation. This is the same for all TRIO programs. These sections are actually very identical to other TRIO programs. The main difference would be the needs section and the objectives. And those are the two primary differences. The rest are all, for the most part, follow the same pattern. But is also likely, as I mentioned, the quality of project design, which is just a logic model and a justification for the logic model, as well as some competitive preference. This is what your grant application will entail. I'm going to go through each of these sections today. So let's start with the needs section. Not only is it the first section in your grant, but it's also the most important. It's how you get funded or not is your ability to ask the readers that you're justified applying for this grant because there is a significant need that exists in your target population. And in the section for EOC, it really only outlines 4 major areas and then some minor areas you need to address as well. The first is they want you to find that there are a large number and percent of families in the target area who are low income. And you can get that information from the census. There's a fact finder site. There's also American Community Survey. a little bit about, more about some data service, but the first thing you have to do is say, hey, there's a lot of low-income families in our target area. And that's important because what the trying here is that in your target area, are there enough families that are eligible that would help and allow you to be able to fill a program of 1,000 participants? And that's a hard thing to do, to get 1,000 participants on an annual basis to participate in a program, especially adults who have a lot of competing priorities. And so the readers want to know that there are enough families to choose from, to recruit from, that would enable you to fill a program of 1,000 participants. The second is they want the completion level baccalaureate degree in your target area. What they're trying to see here is there a high here by indicating that not very many, a very high percentage of your target of a baccalaureate degree or higher. And again, you can find that in the American Community Survey. It's a very easy site to kind of navigate and pull reports from. We could also help you with that. Number 3, a need for education and training that are related to educational trends in your area. So this is where you would distinguish your grants from others based on your particular situation. What are the employment trends going on in your particular region, in your target area? And what are the needs of the adults who are unemployed or underemployed, or those who don't have a degree or equivalency? What are the needs for them to receive education and training based on those employment trends? So this is going to be very localized for you. And fourth section in the need is, what other indicators of need exist in your target area? They want to look at diploma and GED completion rates, financial aid completion of adults and others, college applications and enrollment. The selection criteria does not outline these items for you to put in here. However, what I want to explain is you need to add some of these additional, even though they're not being asked for, because you have to set baseline for your objectives. And these are your 4 objectives that we're going to go over in this section. So low-income families, do you have a lot of them? Is there a high percentage of adults 25 years and older that have completion level bachelor's degree? Is there a need for education and training? And then a whole indicators that you can select from. You get to decide what many of those indicators. Those are the 4 main sections. You're going to have creative about what your data sources are, because for some of these, setting the baselines are not going to be something you can pull from a state site or a national site. Some of them you're going to have to dig really, really deep to talk to school ed programs, workforce development programs. You're going to have to get pretty creative about how to set baselines, which you're going to get your objectives from. Number 3, the data that you're going to be adding will be setting the base objectives. You may not understand yet what that means, but I'm going to explain it in the objective section. You need to use recent data available, and you should be including some comparison data where available, where it's available to you. They want to see not only what are the levels in your target area, but they want you to compare them to other target areas or to the state or region. So there is some comparison data required. If you do not provide data, you risk losing points in the process. So that the comparison data is important. You want to try to use tables, charts, graphs, and then explain them, right? Put a couple, especially if there's something that really needs additional explaining that the table is not clear about. So a table may look like this. You want to eligible target area, target schools, target programs, and compare them to either non-eligible or compare them to the state or national. Non-eligible is just a target, is just one sample example of comparison group would look like. And then, table is not going to have all of this into one table. I'm just sort of presenting this as one example, put a table together. But what I do recommend, though, is section, is that you outline what your baseline is for each objective. Data in the need, you need to tell the reader, this is my baseline for my objective A, B, C, and D, okay? You wanna put a neon sign that says, here's the information that you should be looking at, so that they don't have to, gonna be a lot of numbers and data and tools and things. You wanna be very clear about which data points are the most critical, which data points are you gonna be using to set your objectives, okay? So a little trick of the trade, it's not a requirement, it's just my recommendation to you to make it easier. The starting at 100 and subtract when they don't see something. What they're doing is beginning with 0, and each section either going to add points or not. So as they go to a section worth 2 points, they're either going to give you 2 points or 1 point or 0 points, and so you're along the way. To the extent that you can point the reader to where those points are located, it becomes a lot easier for them to score you those points, right? If they don't find it and they don't see it, they're going to give 0. So it's just much better to, in your grant application, to highlight where the data, the critical data is located. So where can some of this data, I talked a little bit so far, this provides really good compilation reports like the American Community Survey or and while the census is sort of to completion and there's not any from the 2010 census, they do update it term reports, and it is updated as late as I think 2008. And you can find that in the American Community Survey. If you are able to find state and national reports or studies that are those, you really want to dig into your target area, your and then local adult ed force development. EOC can be somewhat challenging because a lot of readily available on what percentage of adults, for example, a lot of FAFSA get their GED, or what percentage of adults complete a GED program and pass their GED in academic year, right? Sometimes there's not a lot of data on that, and so you have to be creative and use proxies, proxy data set for things, and to explain that your and how it represents, your goal towards meeting your particular objectives. So this is the challenge of it. This is the challenge of the EOC grant in general, is it's not data available from any particular report or school system. Our students that are in high school, you are high school students, as long as there's not a talent search available to them in your target area, and vice versa. The talent search program and not an EOC, then the talent search can as well. You decide what your particular look like. Most are serving adults. So stop there for a second, see if there are any questions, and launch a poll about the objective. So I don't see anything so far in the Q&A. Let me launch this poll and we'll get into the objective. If you do have a question about the need that I just went over, please go ahead and put that in the Q&A box, and we'll get to that question as well. So let's launch the objective poll. The poll is, what is the baseline for each objective? Is it data from last year's EOC participants? Is it APR data, 5-year average? Is it current performance of eligible population, national benchmarks, or all of the above? What is your baseline? How do you set objectives? Don't worry, I'm going to tell you the answer. I just want to see where we are, like in terms of knowledge. Don't be shy. Looks like we have 7 out of 13 who have answered so far. So go ahead and just, make a guess. If you're not sure, just, put something down and we'll explain. I'll wait another couple seconds for others to answer, and then we'll launch the poll. Okay. Okay, so I'm going to launch the results. Looks like only 2 answers were selected. That's pretty good. 4 of you actually got the correct answer right, which is the current performance of eligible populations. And let me explain a little bit about how the objectives work in this last section. So let me go back to presentation here. I will say when I was at COE, part of what I did was I worked on an appeals process, which was if you wrote a grant and you were unsuccessful and you only score within a certain range, you could appeal if there were some reader errors. And over the course of, say, 5 years, I read hundreds of grants and readers' comments and really became familiar with the process. And what I noticed was that the vast majority, 90+% of those who are not refunded, their biggest problem, and in many cases their only problem, was their objectives. They literally got 0 on objectives, so they got 0 out of 8, and that was largely because the people writing the grant were not outlining the proper baseline. Readers were saying, I can't judge your objectives. I can't measure whether your objectives are good or not because I don't know what your baseline is. I don't know where you're from. And so that's important to objective section. What we try to do with the objectives is have you set a baseline that represents the current performance of people who would participate in your program. What's going on with adults without the help of, what percentage in their GEDs? What percentage of them are currently enrolled in college? What percentage of them are filling out college applications, right? Your help, right? So that's your baseline. What's going on without you? You're going to set what that baseline is. You're going to say our objective to take that population from where they're currently performing to something higher. So let's say you find that you talk to a local adult education program that helps people with GEDs, and you find that 30% of those who enter the GED program end up completing the program and getting their GED, passing their GED, their high school. So only 30% are currently passing the test. You're going to set your baseline at, let's say, 45 or 50%, right? So you're looking at what's currently happening and you're proposing to do something better, right? With this grant, with this budget, with this staff, with the services, you're going to take them from 30% to, 50% or 45 or 60 or whatever you think that would be. So there are 4 of them for EOC. The first is what percentage of your population, of your students that you serve, will either get a high school diploma or an equivalency by the end of each academic year, okay? The second one is what percentage of those who complete, the equivalency or high school will fill out a financial aid application, what percentage of them will apply to college, and then what percentage of them will ultimately enroll in college, right? So it's earn a diploma, high school diploma, a GED equivalent, fill out a financial aid application, apply to college, and enroll in college. Those are the 4 objectives. The objectives must be, the overview and tips, the objectives must be both ambitious and attainable to earn the credit. And in the objective section, they have to be both. It is not as if you can get one or the other. They have to be both at the same time or you get 0 points. So let's say your baseline was 30% and you wrote your objective to be 100%. While that may be a very ambitious objective, it's not attainable. You're not going to get 100% of your participants to do that. And the readers are going to look at your baseline at 30 and they're going to say 100 is not possible. So therefore you get 0. It's not like they give you 1 point for being super ambitious and giving 100 and then 0 for attainable, and so you earn one of the 2 points. They literally give you 0 if it doesn't meet both criteria simultaneously. That's why it becomes very important to be clear about what your baseline is first, and then set your objective, maybe 15, 10, 15, 20, 25 percentage points higher than the baseline. You don't want to set it 60 points higher or 80 points higher. You don't want to set it at 100. You want to set it at a reasonable amount of growth annually, not only to get the points on the grant, but also if you are awarded the grant, you want your objectives to be something you're reasonably able to achieve in a given academic year. So you don't want to set them too high just because you may not ever meet. The baseline data that I'm talking about is the only thing that you're going to use to make it ambitious. So you're not going to put 20 data points in there, and you're not going to go on and on for a page about why your objective is ambitious. There's only one thing that makes it ambitious, and that's that you've set a proper baseline first. And so that's the only thing you're going to talk about. You're literally going to say this objective is ambitious because it is 15 percentage points above the baseline of X, whatever that baseline is that you've outlined in your needs section. Okay, end stop. That's it. You don't have to put anything else. It's actually very simple and short. What makes it attainable is the other question. What you're going to say in your application is this objective is attainable because of our plan of operation is going to be providing these services. And you're going to tell them, here's a list of 4 services that we're going to use to help people fill out financial aid applications. And you're going to say we have an adequate staff and an adequate budget, and we've got support from the school, the community, the higher ed institution to support these objectives. Okay, so it's ambitious because it's above the baseline. It's attainable because you have a really good plan in place to make it happen, right? You've got a deliberate set of services to make these objectives happen. That's the only thing you need to write in this section, is how to make it ambitious and how to make it attainable. And the last thing to note is that you don't write your own objectives, okay? These objectives are standard for every EOC program. You don't need to add any objectives. You cannot take any objectives out of here. You have to write these 4 objectives, and they need to be written word for word from the program profile sheet that you will find in your RFP, okay? So these are standard for every single EOC program. Will have the same objectives. What will be different is the percentage that you put in those objectives. That will be different, but the language about what the objective is will be the same for everyone. All right. I think I see some things in the chat. Okay, good. So no questions other than just about the presentation so far. Are there any questions about the objectives or anything that I'm talking about? Because this is really, really critical. We could spend more than an hour talking about the need and the objectives, and it still wouldn't be enough time. So it's really important that you get these 2 sections right. The rest of it is pretty straightforward. It's pretty easy, and it's very black and white. The need and the objectives is really where people go wrong the most. I rarely see people lose very many points on the rest of the grant. It's always here. So this would be a good time to stop me, if there's anything pressing that you all want to ask. All right. Let me just make sure. All right. So no questions so far. You can put some in the chat, but definitely put them in the Q&A. All right, I'll go back to sharing my screen. All right, the plan of operation is worth 30 points. This is the section that's worth the most points, and but it's not as difficult. You're going to talk about how you're going to market your project to the community. You're going to, just to let them know about the goals and objectives. You're going to talk about how you're going to recruit and select participants, how you're going to assess the need of those participants, how you're going to deliver the service to them, and there are required services that you have to provide, and then how are you going to administer your project. Those will be outlined for you in the RFP, and you can also contact us and we can help provide you with more context on them, but those are all pretty straightforward items. Some tips and overview. The readers want an actual plan here, not just a statement of what you're going to do. They want a step-by-step plan, which includes, the who, what, when, why, how kinds of questions, right? When are you going to do this? How often? What's the frequency? That kind of thing. So it really should be a thought out plan. When you look at the word plan of operation, they take the word plan very, very seriously and literally. They want a plan for everything. They don't want you just to say, oh, well, yeah, we're going to do that. They want to know how and when. Don't take process or words for granted. The readers don't know your program. You don't have a bunch of former EOC directors who are scoring this application. So don't take things for granted, right? Spell out exactly what it is you're going to do so that they can really understand your program. You want to address your objectives here, right? So when you deliver your service, those services should be directed at your objectives, right? And so you want to say that in your plan of operation. We're going to deliver this tutoring service, and this tutoring service is important because it's going to help our participants earn their high school equivalency or take their, college entrance exam or whatever it might be. This is the part where you develop how you're going to run your program, and you're going to include your required services. I do recommend a scoring rubric for recruiting and selecting, and the readers will be looking for that as well, and that's why I'm recommending it. They want to know that your recruiting and selecting process is not some subjective thing where you can just pick and choose who you want, but there's actually a process. There's a scoring system where you accept and deny and put people on waiting lists and things like that. They want to see that you have that whole process set up. The applicant community support section is where you describe how the applicant, which is your institution or your nonprofit organization or your school system, the applicant is the grantee, right? It's you. What commitments are you going to provide to the grant that is not going to be required for the grant to pay for them? So it's in-kind facilities, equipment and supplies, and personnel, which includes their time and effort, workshops, things like that. And if it is money, right? If the institution is contributing money for scholarships or whatever, they're going to expect you to provide that for all 5 years, not just a one-time thing. You're going to want written commitments from partners, and those written commitments are not going to go into your grant, but you're expected to keep those letters on file in your office in case you're audited. This is a really great place to use tables to very succinctly show those kinds of commitments. And the strength of your proposal is in the in-kind contributions that you're going to have. Quality, let me see. I think there was a question that needed to be answered quickly, so I'm going to answer that and then go back. To clarify, the objectives stay the same. The points are earned by how ambitious and attainable and the percentage. That's correct, yeah. So the question was about the objectives. The objectives, will be exactly the same as the program profile sheet in the RFP. And everybody on this call who's writing an EOC grant will all write for the same 4 objectives. The only difference is what percentages you put in there, and then the readers are going to look to see how ambitious or attainable that particular percentage that you're putting in there is. So yeah, that's exactly right. So let's go to quality of personnel section real quick. This is extremely straightforward. They want to know the director's qualifications. They want to know other staff's qualifications and then plan to employ someone who's overcome similar obstacles as the participants. Now, let me give you some tidbits about this. They want only the minimum requirements, not exact people. So if you had a director who's got a PhD and has worked in EOC for 30 years, you're not going to put a PhD in 30 years. What you're going to put is, if that director retires tomorrow, what would be the minimum requirements to hire someone in the director's position? So do not load these qualifications up with real people's credentials that are currently there now. Put in there only the minimum requirements needed to fill those positions. Pretend as if you're starting a brand new grant, hiring a brand new position. What would be the minimum that you would need to hire someone, okay? And stick to those minimums. Well, what you really need to make sure you put in here is their experience and training related to the project, their fields of study. So if they're required to have a bachelor's or a master's degree, in what fields of study are those degrees supposed to be in? Those are things that are required to include in here. how many years of experience, what kind of experience, and what fields of study. And then the plan to employ is not just a non-discrimination policy. It's not just that you're going to interview people. It's that you actually have a plan to employ somebody similar to those participants that you're going to be serving, someone who's overcome similar obstacles. So it should be a part of the qualifications that somebody has overcome similar obstacles, or they're a trio, they were a trio first in low income student or something like that. So make sure that you're not just putting a non-discrimination policy in here. Make sure it's actually a plan for employing people, finding them, interviewing them, giving them points for those qualifications, and ultimately hiring them as long as they're qualified. The budget is outlined for you. You put personnel salaries, fringe benefits, staff and student travel or participant travel, equipment and supplies. There's an other sections that you can put other things in there, as well as indirect cost. You're only allowed to charge a maximum of 8% indirect cost to the grant on behalf of the grantee. And you're only going to write a 1-year budget narrative, not a 5-year narrative. It's only 1 year. You need to also mention that the costs are reasonable and cost effective and also adequate to run the program. If you're putting a whole bunch of stuff in your plan of operation that you plan to do that's going to cost money, they should be reflected in your budget, because the readers are going to look and see what you're proposing to do. Is there enough money for the kinds of things that you're proposing to do? So there's an adequate budget for your plan. The budget amount will be determined by the RFP. I mentioned that in the open, and likely include a cost per participant maximum. It was $236,000 for a new applicant, and to serve 1,000 participants, $236 per participant. And existing give you $310, I want to say, but you got to wait for the RFP to find out what your budget is. The evaluation. There are 4 sections that to meet the project, that you're going to use qualitative, quantitative data, that you're also using formative and summative evaluation measures, progress towards meeting an objective, and summative will be having at the end of the year. So formative is sort of, when are you going to check throughout the year that you're actually on track to meeting your objective, so that you don't get to the end of the year and find out that you did not meet it. And then they want you to have a plan for disclosing unintended outcomes, and also to be able to look at evaluation measures and say, if we're not on our objective, what are we going to do about it? What kind of change to make sure we do get there? Good to include, tables that are related to your objectives and that show, and what are the kind of tools that you measure, and what kind of data points are you going to. So, the evaluation section is a good place to put these kind of tables in. For the actual overall, I want to talk about a couple of options before we run out of time. We will go over it just because we started a few minutes late, but we are nearing the end, so I'm going to go and ends kinds of. The page limit in 2016 application was 60 pages, and it probably will be similar to that. Great detail, but the formatting and page limits are no longer requirements. They're now just recommendations. So you cannot be defunded or disqualified if you don't meet page limits and things like that. That thrown out a couple of years ago. You will be asked to do a 1-page single-space tract. Table content does not count towards, neither of those count towards your 60-page limit. And then the submission process will be outlined in the RFP. You want to make sure that you're registered and updated in your numbers and your SAM number. We're going to work in, there's a new workspace, which is an online for you to upload all of your documents and to be able to work and edit them through an online platform. You can also download desktop and work on it there. So you're going to want to make in the .gov site for your workspace to be able to work in that application. The appeals process, we can talk about that later, but essentially if you're unsuccessful in a certain scoring range, you would have 15 days to submit an appeal letter to see if they'll grant you to be. If they did make mistakes, you don't just get those points added. They actually reread and rescore the entire. And then, location for documents, right? Like in the RFP, they'll tell you where the narrative goes, where the competitive preference go, the abstract, assurances, program profile, own section, right? In the workspace, they're going to have a separate place to each of those documents. We provide technical assistance on helping people with the submission of their grant application, so we can help just explain some of those things as well. Finally, there are some frequently asked questions that I get on a lot of calls, and a lot of clients, and I'm sharing these questions with you because questions you should be asking yourself, and these are questions I'm not sure about. You can ask me off. We can talk about some of these as well, but these are the most common things that people ask writing their grants. If you're not asking, you probably should be asking them. Some of these are very important and you submit your grant application. So I'm just posing them today so that you can think yourself. And of course, you can email me privately if any of these are answered, in your own mind, or you need help, consult. So again, I know we're at time, but I do want to, give one last request for any questions that you might have today. We can answer. And you can also email me at heath@studysmarttutors.com. If you don't feel comfortable questions live, you can certainly email, and we can jump on a private call, or I can email you back. And then also, please fill out an application. I know our producers are going to be providing you with a link to that evaluation, and so would appreciate if you fill out that quick evaluation. Stop and see again, are there any additional questions that were sort of sparked by having this conversation today? I know it's kind of a quick 101 kind of webinar. We're not going too deep, and we didn't plan to, especially because we know that many of you are first-time grant writers, and we didn't want to overwhelm you. We just kind of want to give you some tips on how to get started and maybe demystify some of it for you. Email address, I'll put it here. Let's see. Email address in the chat box. Okay, looks like you need access. Looks like we just need to, in the collect something. So thank you, Melena, for taking care of that. All right, I'm willing to stay on as long as we need. If anyone does have any questions, please go ahead with the Q&A, or again, privately, and be happy to set up a call with you. Like I said, I'll have back. Thank you so much for time today to attend the webinar. Hopefully you did find at least some points of it useful. And at Study Smart Tutors, we're here to serve as a consulting capacity. If you need someone to help you write the grant or review it for you, we can certainly contract to do that kind of work with you. And we've already started some EOC grants this year, you as well. So thank you to everyone, and that's the end of the formal presentation.
Hey Heath, I'm gonna stop the recording.